Welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. A U.S. federal court halts President Trump's tariff juggernaut, rules that he overstepped his authority by invoking an emergency law to impose sweeping tariffs on numerous countries. The Trump administration appeals the ruling even as it explores other legal options. Defending the tariffs in court, the Trump administration argues any legal setback could put the India-Pakistan truce at risk. Commerce Secretary Lutnick tells the court the ceasefire was only achieved after Trump intervened and offered trading access to avert a full-scale war. The Sensex and the Nifty end with marginal gains after a volatile session. India underperforms other Asian markets, which saw strong gains after the U.S. court ordered blocking Trump's tariffs. European markets and Wall Street also move higher. The Reserve Bank's annual report shows the balance sheet is up more than 8%. Net income jumps 27% on forex gains. The value of gold holdings up 57% as the central bank adds 54 tons of fresh gold in FY25. The RBI report shows a 33% drop in bank frauds in FY25 compared to FY24, but the amount involved in the frauds up nearly threefold to more than 36,000 crore rupees. Public sector banks account for 71% of the fraud amount.
With President Trump, crypto finally has a champion and an ally in the White House.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance attends a Bitcoin conference, declares the U.S. government rejects regulators and promises to fire anti-crypto regulators like current SEC chief Gary Gensler. Bitcoin prices up 60% in the last 12 months. Nvidia reports a record quarterly revenue of $44 billion. This despite its inability to ship semiconductors worth $2.5 billion to China due to U.S. restrictions. CEO Jensen Huang warns against curbs on China, saying the platform that wins in China will lead the world. Chaos at food distribution points across Gaza. Thousands of starving people overrun a warehouse. At least 10 people killed in suspected stampede and Israeli firing. Israel also announces expansion of settlements at the West Bank, even as it continues to bomb Gaza. Tesla CEO Elon Musk leaves the Trump administration after a 5-month stint at the Department of Government Efficiency, tweets that his scheduled time has come to an end. The announcement comes days after he criticized Trump's so-called Big Beautiful tax cut bill. Hailey Bieber sells skincare brand Road to E.L.F Beauty for $1 billion just 3 years after incorporating it. This is E.L.F Beauty's biggest deal yet.
President, Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that yet.
Well, President Trump enjoys his fast food, but not tacos. A reporter's question on the so-called taco trade leaves the president fuming. We explain what the taco trade is, but in just a bit. The top story this evening. In a big blow to U.S. President Donald Trump, a federal court has blocked his so-called reciprocal tariffs under emergency powers. The Court of International Trade in New York has declared the orders issued on what Trump called Liberation Day as illegal and an overreach of power. Now, the court has not only put a permanent halt to most of the tariff, it's also barred any future modifications to them. The Trump administration was swift to appeal the ruling. Trump is yet to respond to the ruling, but a White House spokesperson claimed that unelected judges cannot decide how to address a national emergency. Now, in an attempt to justify the tariffs, the Trump administration cited the recent ceasefire between India and Pakistan. In a submission to the court, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said, and I quote, "This ceasefire was only achieved after President Trump interceded and offered both nations trading access with the United States to avert a full-scale war," end of quote. Lutnick went on to say that any adverse ruling will constrain presidential power and could lead India and Pakistan questioning Trump's offer, which in turn threatens the security of the entire region. The judges did not accept the argument and ruled that sweeping tariffs invoking an emergency law was a clear overreach. Surabhi joins us now with more on the U.S. court's tariff order and its implications for the world and for the Trump administration. Surabhi, take us through what this means now for the tariff juggernaut.
Well, almost 2 months after it was unleashed on the world, the Trump tariff juggernaut has finally hit a legal roadblock. On Wednesday, the U.S. Court of International Trade struck down a series of executive orders which had put Trump's global tariffs in motion. The court's view is that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which the U.S. president had actually invoked while declaring a national economic emergency back in April, simply doesn't authorize him to take unilateral tariff calls and levy universal tariffs. Basically, the court has said that Trump has overstepped the authority that was granted to him by the legislation. And those are the highlights that we just had on the screen earlier. These are the executive orders. So let's talk about what these executive orders were, which have been struck down. Now, the court has basically said that there are 4 executive orders that have been struck down. So let's start with the latest one, Executive Order number 14257. With this order being declared invalid and quote-unquote contrary to law, Trump's 10% baseline tariffs, as well as the reciprocal tariffs, which were levied on countries around the world, become null and void. The other executive orders that have been struck down render the fentanyl tariffs levied on Canada, Mexico, and China invalid. Finally, the court order also strikes down the 25% tariffs levied on goods that were not covered by the US-Canada-Mexico agreement. It is, however, important to note that the 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum remain unaffected by the court's order, as these were imposed under a different act, a different piece of legislation, and I'll come to that in more detail in just a bit. So what happens now? Well, the U.S. administration has already swung into action, and it has challenged the trade court's order at the U.S. Court of Appeals. Legal experts feel that this battle, in all probability, is likely to head to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, in the meantime, Trump has several other legal options in his arsenal to keep the tariff heat on. The first of them is a wider use of Section 232 of the U.S. Trade Expansion Act. Remember the steel and aluminum tariffs, which I just spoke about, and they're still in effect? Now, they have been levied under this very section of the Act. Trump could expand the scope of this Section 232 to other sectors as well. In fact, the administration is already evaluating potential tariffs on aviation, on electronics, and pharma imports under this Section 232. So watch for this. Next, there is the U.S. Trade Act of 1974. Section 122 of this particular act allows the president to levy a baseline tariff of up to 15% to address quote-unquote balance of payment concerns. And, the current trade issues could fall in this category. The levies can last up to 150 days without the need for any sort of congressional approval. Let's move on. There is then the Section 301 of the same U.S. Trade Act. This allows the U.S. government to launch a wide trade investigation against any U.S. trading partner and then impose tariff levies. However, this could be a very cumbersome and time-consuming route, so may not be the U.S. administration's first port of call. Finally, there is the option of using the U.S. Tariff Act of 1930, which has not been used till now. The section number 338 of this legislation allows the U.S. to levy up to 50% tariffs on imports coming from countries which discriminate against the U.S. That's a pretty wide term, so it can be interpreted in any way. Now, as the tariff war takes a legal turn, here's a statement from the White House spokesperson, Kush Desai. This was immediately after the court order. He went on to say, and you can see it on the screen, it is not for unelected judges to decide how to properly address a national emergency. So this was first. And then we had a social media post from the man himself, Donald Trump. And it's very cryptic, but he goes on social media and he says he's on a mission from God and nothing can stop what is coming. Now, it's cryptic, whether it means more tariffs, the use of any one of these factors that I described, only time will tell. But the markets could be rejoicing for now in the interim. However, the only thing that is certain after Wednesday's court ruling is that this is only round one of the legal battle, that the U.S. president has a wide array of legal and executive options in his arsenal to keep the tariff blitzkrieg on.
Well, Surbhi, many thanks for joining us. Yes, it's not over by a long shot just yet. In fact, Rajesh Agarwal, India's chief negotiator in the trade talks with the US, has said the trade discussions between the two nations are progressing positively. Speaking at an event, Agarwal added that negotiated trade deals between two nations can be a defining moment in global trade relations. He also said that India is aiming for a deal that leverages natural competitive advantages on both sides. Sources indicate that the U.S. trade delegation is likely to visit India on the 5th or the 6th of June to take the talks forward. Take a look.
We should be able to work out a trade partnership where there are natural comparative advantages to our businesses on both sides. There are comparative pathways, comparative preferential pathways to our businesses on both sides, so that businesses, wherever they come, they are able to be a natural allies, they are able to work together, grow together in a big way. With that perspective, we are progressing well, and hopefully in these tough times also, we'll be able to navigate and come out with good outcomes sooner than later.
Well, that's India's top negotiator dealing with the U.S. for that trade deal. But let's talk about the markets. Now, stocks gained across the world after the U.S. court blocked most of Trump's tariffs. Asian markets saw sharp gains coming in. Stocks are moving higher across Europe and Wall Street as well. The U.S. dollar rallied in a knee-jerk reaction, providing some relief to the currency that had weakened amidst the trade uncertainty. And Wall Street has been abuzz with a new term. Here's what it's called: taco trade, where taco is short for Trump always chickens out. The phrase, first used by a Financial Times commentator, is meant to describe Trump's on and off tariffs and the manner in which stock markets responded to them. And this has left President Trump fuming. When questioned by a reporter about taco trade, Trump referred to it as a nasty question and defended himself, saying he had never chickened out in trade negotiations. Here's that exchange.
President, Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another number? And I said you have to open up your whole country, and because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. And I said, okay, I'll give you till July 9. I actually asked them, I said, what's the date? Because they weren't willing to meet. And after I did what I did, they said, we'll meet anytime you want. 6 months ago, this country was stone cold dead. We had a dead country. We had a country people didn't think it was going to survive, and you ask a nasty question like that. It's called negotiation.
Well, that's President Trump. Doesn't like tacos now, does he? But back home, the Sensex and the Nifty ended with marginal gains. After a volatile session, the Nifty ended above the 24,800 mark, largely led by IT stocks. The Sensex up 300 points, the Nifty Bank 130 points higher, and a 315-point up move there as far as the mid-caps were concerned. But let's talk about the Reserve Bank's annual report for FY25, which has showed the balance sheet is higher by more than 8%. Net income rose 27% on forex gains, while the value of gold holdings rose 57% as the central bank added 54 tons of fresh gold in FY25. Lata standing by to make sense of the annual report delivered by the RBI today. Let's go over the fine print, Lata.
Well, the interesting takeaway are all over the place. One of them is that the RBI has bought a lot of gold. They have bought 54.13 tons of gold. So the total value that they hold is up by 57%. From 2.75 lakh crore, it's gone to 4.32 lakh crore. Only, 7% of that has come from the actual amount of gold increase by 54 tons, as I told you. The rest is because gold prices have shot up. You would think that 7% is a very big number, but it's bigger. It's the highest in the last 3 years. Last year, their gold holdings, the amount in tonnage rose by 3.5%. The year before by 4.6%. But way back in FY22, they had bought 65 tons of gold. So at that time, it had gone up by 9.3%. So this is not the highest, but clearly the highest in 3 years. The other thing you learn is about why they reported this subdued dividend compared to what the market was expecting. That's entirely because they've increased the reserves, which is why the board met. The board met and said that instead of a contingency reserve of 5.5 to 6.5, they will expand it to 4.5 to 7.5. They've increased the reserves to 7.5. And that means 254 crores more had to be set aside to take the reserves to 7.5%. And if they had not done that, that 76,000 crores would have been added and the surplus could have been 3.6 trillion. But obviously, they probably want to smoothen it out, and they could lower the reserves this year, who knows. The other point to note is that they've not made so much money in selling dollars. You know, when the Bimal Jalan committee allowed them to book the dollar profit, the RBI was making some 14, 15 rupees every dollar sold because the purchase price was the historical price. But now all that has been juiced out. Today, if you do the math, in FY25, they have earned only about 2.8 rupees per dollar sold. Not a great deal of profit because a lot has already been juiced out. That could be the reason why they wanted to change the reserves and give elbow room in the future. Finally, the most important part of the annual report is the economic outlook. No surprises there, except some extra optimism, more than we were prepared for. The global outlook is, of course, bleak. They point to the slowing disinflation. That's important. High public debt, highly leveraged governments, geopolitical and trade tensions, market volatility, and, of course, climate shocks as well. On the domestic economy, the adjectives are a little more glowing than one would have expected. High optimism because of, recovering consumption, continued capex push by the government, strong bank and corporate balance sheets, easing liquidity, financial conditions, a resilient services sector. What they're not pointing out is that rural has done very well, not urban consumption so much. Government capex is very good, private capex is not so good, but those nuances are not there. The one conclusion the bond market can draw is, therefore, will they not cut too much? Are there only 2 more rate cuts, not 3, as some were expecting? That it leads to that kind of a doubt because the optimism stands out.
Netha, many thanks. And we're not done with the annual report of the RBI. It also highlighted that the total number of bank frauds fell by 33%, but the amount involved in the frauds have gone up nearly threefold. Ritu's here with the details. Ritu, take us through what the report is telling us about the quantum of funds involved when we talk about bank frauds.
Well, let's start with something that always raises eyebrows, and that's bank frauds. In FY25, the number of fraud cases actually dropped by a third compared to the previous year. But here's the twist. The amount that was involved actually tripled from FY24, hitting a massive 36,014 crore rupees. But the spike is explainable because a big chunk of more than 18,000 crores actually came from 122 older cases that were initially missed and then reclassified as frauds later. Now, when we look at where the damage was, public sector banks bore the brunt, making up for more than 71% of the total fraud amount, while private banks saw the highest number of cases. In other interesting highlights, India continued to shine when it comes to digital payments. It accounted for 48.5% of all the global real-time payments driven by UPI. Digital payments surged, with total digital transaction volumes rising by nearly 35% and value by 18% year-on-year in FY25, with UPI leading the growth. Overall, 99.9% of all the non-cash retail payments were done digitally in FY25. But even as digital payments continue to rise, cash is not really going anywhere. The value of banknotes in circulation went up by 6%, with the 500 rupee note making up 41% of the volume, followed by the humble 10 rupee note. Now, here's something new as well. The central bank digital currency, or the e-rupee in retail, that rose by 333% in circulation to more than 1,000 crore rupees in FY25, and the CBDC pilot now has 60 lakh users in India. And finally, some good news on the fake note front, where the number of counterfeit notes detected was down to 2.17 lakh pieces in the year.
Thanks very much, Ritu. Let's talk about oil prices now. They rose after a U.S. court's tariff order came in. Supply concerns on account of Trump's threat of potential new sanctions on Russia. Crude also pushed prices higher on the back of that. Meanwhile, gold prices hitting a one-week low. The tariff order has dampened the metal's safe haven allure. A robust dollar further pressured the bullion. From commodities to cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin has been on a bull run for the last year, with the currency up 60% in the last 12 months. This on the back of growing investor confidence and renewed institutional interest in the digital assets. Meanwhile, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance reiterating that the Trump administration's support of cryptocurrencies, saying that the White House is an ally and a champion of the digital assets. Speaking at a Bitcoin conference in Vegas, Vance declared that the U.S. government rejects regulators and promised to fire anti-crypto regulators like the current SEC chief.
And I'm here today to say loud and clear, with President Trump, crypto finally has a champion and an ally in the White House. We've got to clean up the wreckage that the last administration left us. And since day one, that is exactly what we've been trying to do. Our administration, we prioritized eliminating the rules, the red tape, and the lawfare that we saw aimed at crypto by our predecessors. We're ending the weaponization of federal regulations against this community. To put it simply, Operation Choke Point 2.0 is dead, and it's not coming back under the Trump administration.
The Trump administration backing cryptos, going all in. And Bharti Enterprises chief Sunil Mittal has called for regulatory clarity on cryptocurrency, citing unprecedented growth in the last few months. Speaking at the CII Annual Business Summit, Mittal stressed that India cannot afford to stay on the sidelines when it comes to cryptocurrencies. Take a look.
Things have started to move very fast on crypto. And of course, AI, we already discussed, is moving very fast. And this is an area where the government will have to start applying their mind on how to ensure that the right regulatory framework is available for India to make full use of AI, crypto, whenever the time comes.
That's Sunil Mittal. Now, the government will release the fourth quarter GDP data tomorrow. A CNBC-TV18 poll pegs GDP to accelerate by 6.8%. This is the highest pace of growth in FY24. Growth in the first quarter was 6.7%. Then it slowed down in Q2 and Q3. With this, the GDP for the full year is expected to be 6.3%. This is slightly below the government's own estimate of 6.5%. So that will be the number to watch tomorrow. But in numbers today, Bajaj Auto posting a strong quarter that surpassed street expectations on all fronts. Quarterly profit and revenue ahead of estimates, up 6%. The company said double-digit revenue growth in its premium motorcycles and electric scooter segment drove revenue higher. That's Bajaj Auto. Onto Ola Electric, a weak set of numbers for Q4. Net loss widened to 870 crore rupees in the quarter. The figure was also higher than the 564 crore rupee loss it reported in the December quarter. Revenue also plummeted by 62% on an annual basis. So tough quarter there for Ola Electric. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has said that India has redesigned and refined its strategy and response against terrorism. Speaking at a CII event, Singh warned Islamabad that the Indian armed forces exercised restraint during Operation Sindoor, despite having the capacity to inflict far greater damage. Speaking at the same event, India's Air Force chief raised concerns over persistent delays in defence procurement projects. Take a look.
Once a timeline is given, not a single project that I can think of has been completed on time. So this is something where we have to look at. Why should we promise something which cannot be achieved? While signing the contract itself, some of the times we are sure that it is not going to come up.
Well, that is the Air Chief reiterating his concern. Now, Vietnamese auto major VinFast is looking to make its debut in India. Sources have told us that 4 banks have collectively extended a loan worth 1,700 crore rupees 6 months ago. The loan was sanctioned for the company's EV plant in Tamil Nadu. Razorpay has completed its reverse flip process, shifting its parent company's domicile from the United States to India. This move comes as the company prepares to make its market debut, heading to Dalal Street with an IPO. The company had initiated this process in May of 2023. However, sources say that the cost of the reverse flipping for the company will be around $150 million. So another payment company, another fintech company, shifting its domicile back to India after PhonePe. Up next on India Business Hour, Tesla CEO Elon Musk leaves the Trump administration after a 4-month stint. That and more when we return. Catch all of CNBC-TV18's news and updates on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Jio, Hotstar and X. Top international news. Israeli forces continue to attack Gaza, killing at least 55 people so far. The death toll includes 23 people who were killed in an intense wave of strikes on central Gaza. Meanwhile, 10 people have also died in Gaza after thousands of Palestinians barged into a United Nations warehouse. People were seen tearing sections off the warehouse in an attempt to find food. The Israeli government has also approved 22 illegal settlements in the West Bank. This is the largest one-time approval in history. Ukraine's military has said that it struck several Russian weapon production sites in or around Moscow during a major overnight drone attack. Russia said its air defense units downed 3 Ukrainian drones targeting its capital. Meanwhile, Russian troops have taken control of a town in Ukraine's Sumy region and a village in eastern Ukraine. Tesla CEO and billionaire Elon Musk has exited the Trump administration, bringing an end to what has been a tumultuous 130-day stint as a special government employee heading the Department of Government Efficiency. In a tweet, Musk thanked US President Trump for the opportunity to slash what he called wasteful federal spending. Musk's off-boarding announcement has come days after he criticized Trump's tax cut bill. Chip giant NVIDIA reporting a strong set of numbers in the first quarter, record quarterly revenue of $44 billion, and this despite its inability to ship semiconductors worth $2.5 billion to China due to US restrictions. The company's CEO Jensen Huang has warned against curbs on China, saying the platform that wins in China will lead the world.
The platform that succeeds is the platform with the most developers. Just like iPhone's successful because of lots of developers, Windows successful because of lots of developers. All these platforms succeed because there are a lot of developers. China is home to 50% of the AI researchers in the world. And so we want the world to build on American technology stack. We want every developer in the world to prefer the American technology stacks.
Well, the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi has confirmed to CNBC-TV18 that no student visa appointments have been cancelled. This confirmation comes after the Trump administration ordered embassies to stop scheduling new appointments for student visas. This as the U.S. government prepares to implement comprehensive social media screening for all international applicants. Cosmetics brand E.L.F Beauty has bought celebrity entrepreneur Hailey Bieber's skincare brand Rhode for $1 billion. This comes as the beauty giant plans to expand its footprint further into the skincare segment. The transaction will comprise of $800 million in cash and stock, including an additional potential of $200 million based on Rhode's performance over the next 3 years. This will be E.L.F Beauty's biggest acquisition to date. A massive section of a glacier broke apart in the Swiss Alps, triggering a landslide of ice, mud and rocks that caused widespread damage in Blatten, a small village of around 300 people. The residents had already been evacuated last week due to the looming threat. At least one person remains missing. Search and rescue operations involving a drone are currently underway. And before we go, 2 Indian Navy women officers have successfully completed a historic journey across the world's 3 largest oceans. They covered over 25,000 nautical miles, touched 4 continents, and sailed through 3 cyclones after setting sail on the 2nd of October last year. Lieutenant Commander Rupa and Lieutenant Commander Dilna have now returned to Goa. They were received by Defence Minister Rajnath Singh and other top naval officials. Well, congratulations to both there. What a tremendous feat. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. Thanks very much for watching. Do stay tuned. The news will continue right here on CNBC-TV18. We're back in a moment.